Okay, I'm going to show you how to import your image into Chrome Canvas and then begin adding color. So obviously the first thing you want to do is you want to open Chrome Canvas. So when you type that into the search bar, this should come up. Click the link. Now, you're going to do New from Image. You want to push that button. You can see I've got some other projects that I've started already. When you do that, you're going to need to search for your image. I just cut that out for the sake of time. Now, I'm going to start with the color green, but I'm not going to start with green. I'm going to start with blue and yellow, because as you saw on the color wheel, blue and yellow make green. Now, that doesn't mean I can't use green, but we are trying to do the color blending technique first. Okay, you want to adjust the size of your dots, and again, there's no real set size. It depends on your image. I like to start off with smaller dots and try that out. Okay, and I also have the opacity set very high at like 100. Now over here you'll see a button for layers. Okay, if you'll notice, when I turn this layer off, the color still stays. Okay, that's because I am coloring on a layer that is on top of my line art. Imagine that you have a piece of plastic over top of your artwork and you're coloring on the plastic. Okay, it's kind of like that. Okay, so I'm going to come back in here and add some more blue, and now I'm going to switch to yellow, and I'm going to start adding some dots in there. Now, it looks kind of strange to begin with, but as you work, experiment. For example, one thing I figured out is that if I adjust the opacity down to 50% or even lower, maybe like 20%, the color blending works a lot better. With digital art, it's very different than analog media such as paint or colored pencils. So by adjusting the opacity, you get a better blending of the colors. They sort of overlap each other. Okay, so as you're working, experiment with different shades of blue and green, or blue and yellow, right? So here's a little bit darker. Now I'm also putting in some purple. Purple is very similar to green. It is close to green on the color wheel. They both share the color blue, and so I'm experimenting with that. That was one thing that Impressionists and Pointillists tried to do, is they tried to look at how colors interact with each other. And so do some experimentation. Use colors that you might not normally think of in an object. Okay, so I'm just going in here and I'm adding some more detail. I'll probably come back to that and clean it up a little bit. But the next thing I want to talk to you about is complementary colors. Another thing Impressionists and Pointillists tried to do was they tried to avoid using the color black. So instead, to make something darker, they would use the colors opposite or complement. Okay, so in this case, green is across from red on the color wheel. And I know I want my flower to be red, because it's a rose and in the picture it's red. So first I'm going in and I'm creating some darker spaces using the green. And I have the opacity set up pretty high on that. Okay, and now I'm going in with a lighter opacity on the red, and as I do that, you see how the green sort of blends through the red and it creates kind of a brownish, blackish color. Okay, so again, you want to experiment with your colors. You want to periodically turn off that line art layer so you can see how your colors are interacting with each other. And bounce around. You know, start with one color red and kind of fill in the space, and then go to a different color red. Also adjust the opacity. You can see here I'm starting to create the darker areas with a more solid color. I've adjusted the opacity higher. Okay? So I'm just kind of playing around and creating what I think looks good. Again, you want to make sure you turn that line art layer off periodically so you can see how the colors are blending. Alright, I'm just touching up the leaves a little bit with some dark blue. And then I noticed that in my photograph the highlights looked kind of pink, so I'm layering in a little bit of a pink color over top. Okay, now we're ready to save our image. So up here we're going to click these three little dots and click Save as Image, and then you want to make sure you remember where you saved it. And then I just named mine Pointillism Coloring or something like that. 3 or Day 3. Pointillism Day 3 is what I called it. You can call it whatever you want. And we're going to hit save. Okay, so we've saved this image. That's our day's work, and now we're ready to upload our progress into our slideshow. We're going to use the same slideshow that we put our photograph and our line art in. So I'm going to insert it here into day 1. Now, I made mine the same size as the rectangle. I don't know why. You don't have to do that. In fact, you can delete that rectangle. I put it in there just as a visual reference, but it's really not anything more than that. Okay, so here's my first day's progress. Okay, now there's a couple more slides for you to save your progress as you go. But before we get to that, let's put the date. So we're going to change day 1 to the date. Now I did this on May 21st, 2020. So I'm putting that date in the box. Okay. So the next time I work on this, I will load that progress onto my next slide, which is day 2, and then day 3, and then the final. Now you'll probably work on this more than 3 days, but I just want to see 4 days worth of progress.